Deep in the hills of Andhra Pradesh, in the Araku Valley region, there is a cave where stone appears to breathe. Water falls in the darkness. Shapes rise from the floor like frozen flames. Shadows turn ordinary rock into faces, animals, temples, and gods. And for generations, visitors have walked into Borra caves with the same uneasy feeling. This place is not just a geological formation. It feels like a story the earth is still telling. The legends say the cave was discovered through a sacred sign. Some versions speak of a cow falling through a hole in the ground, a hidden chamber below, and a stone formation inside that people came to associate with Lord Shiva. Other stories connect the flowing water, the strange shapes, and the darkness to older local memory. But science looks at the same cave and sees something equally powerful. Not magic. Time. Limestone. Water. Pressure. Minerals. Millions of years of patient erosion. So which is the truth? Is Borra Caves a sacred legend wrapped around a natural wonder? Or is the legend itself a way people learn to understand a landscape too strange to ignore? Borra Caves sits in the eastern Ghats, surrounded by forested hills, valleys, tribal communities, and the kind of terrain that makes every bend in the road feel like it is hiding something older than the map. The entrance itself is part of the drama. You do not simply look at the cave from outside. You descend into it. The air changes. The light weakens. Sound begins to behave differently. Dripping water becomes louder than footsteps. Voices echo, then return distorted. The ceiling opens into high chambers, and the stone around you stops looking like stone. It becomes architecture. It becomes sculpture. It becomes evidence of forces moving too slowly for the human mind to feel in real time. That is why places like this become legendary. A cave is not only a hole in the earth. It is a threshold. Above ground, the world has trees, roads, sunlight, names, and directions. Below ground, the rules shift. Distance becomes uncertain. Shadows create false shapes. Water seems to come from nowhere. Long before a visitor hears the scientific explanation, the body understands the cave emotionally. It feels hidden. It feels ancient. And it feels intentional, even when no hand carved it. One of the most repeated legends around Borra Caves begins with a cow. In the story, a cowherd loses an animal while grazing in the hills. The cow disappears, and the search leads to an opening in the ground. Below that opening is a cave. Inside the cave, a stone formation is found, and the lost animal is connected to a discovery that feels more than accidental. The details change depending on who tells the story, but the emotional structure stays the same. Something ordinary vanishes. A hidden place is revealed. A natural formation becomes a sacred sign. And suddenly the landscape has meaning. This is not unusual in Indian sacred geography. Across the subcontinent, unusual rocks, springs, caves, trees, and hilltops are often absorbed into devotional memory. A formation that resembles a lingam is not treated as random stone by the people who worship there. It becomes a point where geology and faith meet. The modern viewer may ask whether the legend literally happened. But there is another question that may be more interesting. Why did this cave invite that kind of story in the first place? Why did people look at these formations and feel that ordinary language was not enough? The scientific explanation begins with limestone. Limestone is vulnerable to water that carries mild natural acids. Rainwater absorbs carbon dioxide from the air and soil, becoming slightly acidic. Over long periods, that water seeps into cracks, joints, and weaknesses in the rock. It does not smash the cave open in one dramatic event. It dissolves it. Drop by drop, channel by channel, the water widens tiny spaces into passages. Underground streams help carve chambers. Minerals carried by water are deposited again, slowly building shapes from the ceiling and the floor. Stalactites hang downward. Stalagmites rise upward. Sometimes they meet, forming columns. This is the first major payoff. The cave does not need a sculptor, because the sculptor is time. But that explanation does not make the cave less mysterious. In some ways, it makes the cave more unsettling. A human artist works in years. A river works in centuries. Limestone remembers in millions. When you stand inside Borra Caves, you are not just looking at rock. You are looking at time made visible. Here is where the legend and the science begin to overlap. Human beings are pattern-making creatures. We see faces in clouds, animals in stars, and figures in firelight. Inside a cave, that instinct becomes stronger because the environment is already unstable. Light comes from one direction. Shadows exaggerate edges. Wet stone reflects like skin. A narrow beam can turn a rough mineral deposit into a figure. A curve can become a serpent. A column can become a shrine. A hollow can become a mouth. A formation that looks ordinary in daylight can become sacred under flickering light and echoing sound. This does not mean people were foolish. It means they were human. The cave pushes the mind toward meaning. It offers shapes that are almost recognizable, but not fully fixed. That uncertainty is exactly what makes it powerful. A perfect statue tells you what it is. A cave formation asks you to decide. And when a community returns to the same shape again and again, the interpretation can become tradition. The rock remains natural. The meaning becomes cultural. The mystery is born in the space between them. Borra Caves is also part of a living cultural landscape. The hills around Araku are not empty scenery. They are home to communities, languages, songs, routes, markets, memories, and ways of reading land that do not always fit neatly into tourist brochures. For local communities, a cave may be more than a destination. It can be a marker, a warning, a sacred place, a source of water, a boundary, or a story passed from one generation to the next. Modern tourism often compresses such places into quick labels. Beautiful cave. Ancient formation. Legend of a cow. But the deeper truth is more layered. A landscape becomes meaningful because people live with it. They name its dangers. They remember its surprises. They attach stories to what cannot be easily explained. Science can explain how limestone dissolves. It cannot fully explain why a particular formation becomes beloved, feared, worshipped, photographed, and retold. That part belongs to culture. And culture is not the opposite of truth. It is one of the ways human beings survive contact with the unknown. Today, Borra Caves is no longer only a hidden chamber in the hills. It is a destination. Lights illuminate the formations. Walkways guide visitors. Cameras turn darkness into content. Families pose where earlier generations may have stood in silence. The cave has become part pilgrimage, part science lesson, part tourist spectacle, and part mystery attraction. That changes how people experience it. Artificial lighting reveals details that darkness once concealed, but it also creates new illusions. Colored light can make mineral formations look more dramatic, more alive, more intentional. A safe path makes the cave accessible, but it also makes the wildness feel curated. This is the strange bargain of famous natural wonders. To protect them, we manage them. To share them, we transform them. And sometimes the transformed version becomes the one people remember. Still, the cave resists becoming ordinary. Even with lights and railings, it keeps its power. The scale is too large. The shapes are too strange. The sound of water is too persistent. You can modernize the entrance, but you cannot make the earth feel young. So what is Borra Caves really? A legend? A geological formation? A sacred place? A tourist site? The answer is yes. And that is what makes it interesting. The mistake is thinking the scientific explanation destroys the legend. It does not. It changes the question. The cave was formed by water and limestone, by pressure and time, by chemistry working in darkness. But the legend explains something else. How human beings respond when nature creates a place that feels too deliberate to be random. The sacred story does not need to replace geology. And geology does not need to erase wonder. Borra Caves matters because it shows how mystery can survive explanation. Once you know how stalactites form, the cave is still strange. Once you understand limestone, the shadows still move. Once you learn the science, the old stories do not disappear. They become evidence of a different kind. Evidence that people have always looked at the earth and asked the same question. What is this place trying to tell us? If Borra Caves made you see stone, water, and legend differently, stay with the series. In the next mystery, we follow another place where local stories, strange geography, and scientific clues collide. Follow the channel, subscribe for the next investigation, and tell me in the comments what you think Borra Caves really proves, that legends grow from misunderstanding, or that some landscapes are so powerful they create legends naturally.